think Aki's working with the presentation there. Okay. Okay, so this is stuff we in the room already know, but I think it's always good to return back to the basics, even though, we probably all in this room studied the principle before. We know about, peace starts with me. We know what the end is, but I think it's always good to have a refresher. So the question I want to, there we go. The question I want to ask to you all today is, what, if any, universal principles can lead to peace in my own life? No, there are a lot of religions, there are a lot of philosophies, there are a lot of ideologies, there's a lot of belief systems in the world. And a lot of them purport to be having all the answers. We purport to have all the answers because we have the divine principle and we have Father and Mother Moon. But I want to explore this question with you all today. And to start exploring this question, I want to start by defining what a universal principle is. Universal principle is a truth that is true regardless of race, gender, religion, political ideology, or philosophy. So no matter if you're Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, if you're black, white, yellow, if you're male or female, if you follow one philosopher or you follow another philosopher, a universal truth should transcend all of those categories, all of those differences between humanity. And they should also be true in the natural world. And Father Moon, as we know, when we look into the Black Book, the exposition of the divine principle, and the first thing it tries to address is, why are human beings ignorant? Why are we in a state where we don't fully know things? And it talks about Christianity. And at the end of the section in the introduction, it says, so many religions and philosophies and their accomplishments have become added spiritual burdens for people today. Added spiritual burdens for people today. And they have left only dim, sputtering wicks glimmering in the falling darkness. Yes, ouch. Ouch indeed. Why is it saying this? Why does the exposition of the divine principle even start like this? It starts like this because it's examining Christianity and how it started from the amazing sacrifice of Jesus Christ and how he moved hundreds and then thousands and then millions of people to follow his teaching. Believe in me and you shall be saved, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. But what he's pointing out here is that over the course of history, the bright light that fueled so many Christians back in the first few hundred years of his existence has slowly withered. Why? Well, what have we seen in the past few hundred years? We've seen the Renaissance, then a few centuries later, the Enlightenment, the huge development of science that challenged a lot of the Christian teachings. And then we get into the 19th century with philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, who I'm personally studying, a huge critic of Christianity. Samuel knows too. Huge critic of Christianity, questioning so many premises, not only of Christianity, but of philosophy in general, questioning the premises of the Socratics, for example, Christianity and Greek thinking, the two very foundations of Western culture. People like Nietzsche and others began questioning it. And what has Mother Moon been saying recently? She's been saying, because these skeptics and their questions were not answered, communism arose, which killed hundreds of millions of people. Moral confusion has arose because the skeptics were never satisfied. They were asking good questions. Nietzsche, for example, asks, why are Christians relying on virtues of humbleness and meekness instead of exercising what he calls will to power to create something better in their own life? He asked that and many other questions, and they were not fully satisfied. And so radical ideologies like communism, also fascism, arose in Europe and have promulgated throughout the world. So we know that Christianity, for example, is not a source of universal truth because it needs to be true regardless of race, gender, religion, political ideology, or philosophy. And if it has questions that cannot be answered, then that's a problem. Same if you follow Judaism or Islam or Buddhism. If there's questions, it slowly becomes a source of darkness within the soul. It leads to more doubt, more questioning. And that's many people today. Even in my own life, sometimes I feel doubt over what's true, what's not. There's this question I have, and no one seems to be able to give the answers. And that creates a lack of peace within my own soul. So it's very important to try and find universal principles. And that's the beauty of the divine principles. It is actually one of the first texts to seek to find truth that is both true with all religions and the science that has emerged in the last 400 years. So I'm just going to explore two of those today. I know that we probably know them, but I think it's a good review because the question I want to explore as a reminder is what, if any, of these universal principles can lead to peace in my own life? The world is a whole nother story, but if these universal principles that Father and Mother Moon are trying to saying they have discovered, if they can't even bring peace in my own life, I'm not sure how they can help the world. I'm not sure how they can answer deep questions that many people have. So let's explore the first one that they talk about, which is dual characteristics. Now, if you've studied the principle at all, if you've been to any workshop or lecture, you've heard this before, that when we look throughout the universe, we find in human beings, male and female, and the same goes with animals, plants, and then down to the molecular structure of the universe, molecules and atoms. We've heard this before. But why is this universe? Aki's smiling like, oh my gosh, yes, I have. But why is this universal principle important? It's not that there are dual characteristics, but it's what those dual characteristics do throughout the universe at any form of life or any level of the universe. They all seek to join together. In atoms, protons and electrons somehow always find their way together to form atoms. And then atoms form molecules. And then in plants, we see these two elements of stamen and pistil coming together. I'm not a scientist, so I can't really explain to you how that works. But I can explain to you how it works in animals and human beings, male and female animals, men and women in human society. There's always a constant drive for these two dual characteristics to come together. Come together. But why is there this drive? Well, to understand this question, we have to ask ourselves, beyond male and female, is there another set of dual characteristics that might be more fundamental? I would say yes. There is the dual characteristics of internal nature and external form. We've also heard that before. But what does that mean for us? Internal nature and external form. That's a very weird way to describe ourselves. Well, think of it as human beings have a body, right? We have a brain. It sends neurons to command our various limbs and body parts and organs. And we have cells that reproduce, and we have a drive to seek shelter, to seek food, to make offspring. But what is the internal part? Some people call it soul. We see that throughout religion, or the divine or the sacred. But I think of it as consciousness. The divine principle uses the term mind or heart, but I'm going to explore it as consciousness for a second because there is something within human beings that overrides our bodily drives. You can think of a mother trying to save their dying child under a car. You've heard the stories of where somehow, some way, they lift an entire car to save the dying child. The things that human beings will do that circumvent the bodily structure, the bodily desires, the bodily wants is unfathomable. What we do for love, what we do to experience beauty in this world, what we do to seek the truth, what we do to fight for what's right. People going into a war zone knowing that they're probably not going to make it out. If they go anyway, for what? For the sake of righteousness and goodness and for what they believe in. There's something within human beings that overrides our body. We are conscious beings. We have a mind. We have a heart. But it's not just true of humans. There's a form of that in animals. For example, chimpanzees are you know, evolutionary ancestors and the various animals that make up that line, they don't just have a purely bodily structure. They also have a form of consciousness. Same with plants. With plants, it's manifested in the fact that if you play crappy music towards them, they're going to start wilting. It's like, why? It's music. Do they understand beauty? Maybe they do. What about molecules and atoms? What are human beings made up of? Fundamentally, we have cells, but even beyond that, what are we? We're a bunch of molecules and atoms and energy and matter, all the things that make up all parts of the universe. We have that within us. So if we're conscious, we can't just say, oh, we're conscious, but the things that we're made up of, oh, they can't be conscious. No, I would say, and the divine principle claims that even the smallest levels and parts of the universe have some form of consciousness. Now, I want to bring this back to dual characteristics coming together. Why do they come together? Why is it important? Why is this an important universal principle for us to live our lives on? Yes, dual characteristics come together, but for what? What do protons and electrons come together for? When they come together, they always make a higher unit. They make an atom. When atoms come together, by definition, they make a molecule. Why do plants give up their existence for animals and humans? Why do animals give up their existence for humans? Is it purely a dominance hierarchy and the food chain? Or is it a universal principle that dual characteristics come together, centering on a higher purpose, centering on perhaps a higher form of life in this universe? Now that's big. That's big. Because when we're looking at ourselves and, okay, how do I achieve inner peace? It's like, okay, I know I'm this conscious being, but I also know I have these basic bodily desires. Why do I care if I'm in contradiction? Well, if this universal principle states that everything comes together for a higher purpose, then our inner peace is necessary for something higher and beyond ourselves. That phrase, living for the sake of others, that starts with us. By us, there's all this talk about mind, body, unity. But it's like, and peace starts with me. But it's like, well, if we ourselves are not aligned with this universal principle, then how are we going to create families that want to exist for the sake of this society? How are we going to create communities that come together to build a state or a nation? How are nations going to come together to build a world that shares common values? It has to start with us. And that's where this next universal principle comes in, this principle of living for the sake of others. Call it the three great blessings. Tons of terms for it. Genesis 1:28. But when the two dual characteristics, the two parts of ourselves come together in unity, we become a peaceful being. And then peaceful beings, in the form of men and women, come together. They can create peaceful families. And peaceful families can create a peaceful society, nation, and world. And then maybe eventually we can live harmoniously with the rest of the creation, with the other animals and plants, and not ruin the atmosphere, whatever stuff is going on in terms of the climate. It starts with us, and it starts by recognizing that that is a universal principle. It's true at every level of the creation, whether you're a human being, whether you're an animal, whether you're just a particle 10 billion light years away. That is a fundamental universal principle in this world. So I want to ask these questions, and we can come together and talk about these questions. The first is asking ourselves, do I believe I'm a conscious being? And do I believe I have both a mind and a body, an internal nature and an external form? Is that something that we can agree on? And then number two, does thinking of others, in other words, does putting our mind and body to unity, joining between men and women, all these joinings of dual characteristics, do they lead to more peace in my life? Does thinking of others, does thinking of that higher purpose, does that bring peace in my life? And then lastly, how can more universal truths be discovered and implemented for peace? Now, I know we might say, okay, we have the divine principle, we have Japan's teachings, Those are all the other universal principles. But science, for example, is constantly evolving. Science may, in fact, challenge our principles, some of our teachings. What do we do? How can we continue to discover and implement universal principles in our life that can be applied for any human being, no matter what belief system they have? So I hope this kind of review of chapter one, if you call it, content, uh, maybe has helped you to think about your life and your peace in your own life. And yeah, thank you.